We've got to act perfectly normal. Oh, okay, yeah. Oh, you guys don't get to be seen doing the craziness too. Okay, that's fine. All right. Well, that's obviously in reference to dear friend Gene Wilder, who passed away today. To give you an indication, this is when he passed away and when we're taping. But Gene Wilder has left us a lot of great movies, a lot of great memories, and we'll miss him. But we have a lot of wonderful things to remember him by. Thank you, Gene. Okay, welcome to Progressive Soup. My name is David Stevenson. Our show tonight is going to be about a number of things, including candidates for public office, personal choices of candidates that are public office. One of my guests, Myrna Watanabe, who is a candidate in Connecticut's 76th Assembly District. I guess her favorite candidate, we'll let you be your own favorite candidate. Okay,
Well,
Myrna?
yeah.
Tell us who you are, what brought you to this point in time, and what you're running for, and why.
I will be happy to do that. And I also do want to say several words about Gene Wilder. He was one of my husband's favorite people to run into and talk to at the Central Park Zoo. So, all right.
All right.
Well, I started my career as a biologist studying alligators in the field. My field was alligator maternal and communication behavior. So, you know, if you start your life doing that, and it's in a swamp, I guess I could consider going towards the end of my life, going to another kind of swamp, otherwise known as the state legislature.
Okay, well that's a description I haven't heard in the state of Connecticut. I've heard that in Florida, but not in Connecticut. So go ahead.
Well,
tell us about the legislature. Tell us about where you see yourself making a positive impact on the legislature.
Well, first of all, look at what they did this year. Everybody is mad at Democrats. The first day I went out door to door, I went to a Democrat's house. Guy was in his driveway, walked up the driveway. I said, hi, I'm running, blah, as a Democrat. And he said, I'm never voting for another Democrat again as long as I live. Never. It has nothing to do with you. I hate all the Democrats and what they've done. I hate what they've done in Congress. I hate what they've done in the state legislature. I hate what they've done, and I won't vote for you. So, okay, turned around, walked away, and he yelled at me as I walked. And I wouldn't vote for Trump if he was the last man standing.
Well, that's a combination. That's anger personified.
Right. And you hear it. You hear a lot of it at the door. You talk to people. I hate the governor. Oh, okay. Join the crowd. What am I supposed to say to you? Or I'm a state worker, and I have been pink slipped, and I am mad at everybody. And this is what I'm hearing. So they're mad at the Democrats. They're mad at almost everybody who's sitting in the state legislature. So it's time for a new face. One of the other things that I feel very strongly about is I feel strongly about term limits. I think we need term limits. I think the man I'm running against has been there for 28 years, and that's not the longest standing person there. And you say, well, what have you done? What are you? Are you, Are you like the late Senator Kennedy, where you've had all these accomplishments? Or, have you kept a seat warm? And the answer is, some of them have kept a seat warm, and they need to go. And we need to set up a way to have term limits. I will not make any friends in the state legislature by saying that. But I think that will bring some new ideas. You don't get new ideas when the same person is there year after year after year, or term after term or after term. And they, all right, we'll put in this bill. It doesn't pass. I'll be reelected, so I'll put in the bill again. Oh, it doesn't pass. I'll be reelected. I'll put in the bill again. No fresh ideas, no new ways of looking at things. And it's time that we have people who have a new way or different way of looking at things, and that is one of the reasons I'm running. Can I solve the state's problems? No one individual can solve the state's problems, but I'd like to be a part of looking at ways to solve the state's problems.
Here's a question you might not have heard yet, and I don't know the answer to it, and I'm just guessing. Nationally, areas are gerrymandered, districts are gerrymandered all over the country, and state legislatures all over the country gerrymander not just state districts, but federal districts for Congress in order to keep incumbents in, to make it very difficult for any incumbent, regardless of what party they belong to, very difficult for them to lose. Does that happen? Is that way in Connecticut? Do you have any notion as far as how districts are drawn in Connecticut?
Districts are drawn to keep the incumbents in the party that that has a majority in the state house. All right. Yes, it's certainly done that way. It's done all over the country. There's a website where you can actually pick a district and ask it to test it for being gerrymandered.
Interesting.
I think we looked at the 5th district in Connecticut, which comes down in this weird little claw, and it's just weird in how it's gerrymandered. So, for example, Bristol is in the 1st district, but Bristol is right next to places that are in the 5th district. All right? This is obviously gerrymandered. There's no question about it. And certainly legislatures have they can get away with it. And they do it. Which is why, in Florida, they had, I can't remember what it was, but it was, I think there were 2 women Democratic candidates who got completely gerrymandered out of their district, and they were looking for another district. I think part of it included Jacksonville. And why? Well, because you wanted to maintain one of these as a minority district. I'm talking about minority in terms of the word race, which I don't like and I don't like to use.
Right.
All right.
Well, we're all minorities, and even one day, whites will be a minority, only in the sense that they'll be less than 50% of Americans. They'll be by far the largest minority by leaps and bounds, but in a sense they'll be less than 50%. So they'll be some whites will be considering themselves to be a minority.
And that's their problem.
There's also a district in Florida a couple years ago where a libertarian, I think it's Colonel Allen West, who wasn't exactly currying favor with his own political party, which was a Republican Party. So when they redistricted Florida, they changed his district just enough so he could lose. Another example would be Ohio, where Dennis Kucinich was had won the same district by good pluralities for quite a number of terms. The legislature did redistricted his area enough for him to lose. And there's a guy, I think, I'll agree with you to a degree that term limits are a good thing. But I think we can all think of examples of folks that have been in legislatures for a long time that are still pretty good. And you mentioned Ted Kennedy as being an example of a guy that was in office for many decades and still did a pretty good job. Michael Zacchea, do you have any particular candidates that you like, and if so, why?
So it's not so much that I have a particular candidate that I like, it is that I have a particular class of candidates that I like. What we're starting to see is many more veterans running for office in the state, both in the House and the Senate. And I think that's a positive development for our state. I think that and this is sort of a political science argument, but there's sort of this idea that veterans have a constitutional ownership of the Constitution in certain ways that other students or other politicians may not, and that they tend to put and have put, have the experience of putting country before self and things like that. So I'm very encouraged by the fact that there are a number of veterans who are running in the state, and I think that's a positive development for our state. And I think it also goes to Myrna's point about term limits, because the state legislature is a little bit stodgy. It's not a fast-moving river by any stretch of the imagination. So I'm encouraged by that.
I'm going to put in a good word for a couple of folks, and I'm not going to say why I favor them. I'm just going to ask the audience to take a look at them, go online, learn a little bit about them, take a look at what they believe in. Don't pay any attention to what party they belong to, because the majority of Americans, and I think it's almost up to 60% now, describe themselves as being, well, in Connecticut it's unaffiliated, but nationwide it's independent. So I would fancy that that the majority of Americans aren't really affiliated with either party, and that's because they don't like either party. They like to look at candidates and judge candidates on their own merits. So I'm going to throw a quick shout out to Raheb Ali Brennan in the second district in Connecticut, and I believe in the 24th Senate district, I'm almost certain it's the 24th, Ken Gucker, who again, and I'm not going to say anything about what they stand for, what they believe in. I'm leaving it to the audience to take a look at what their stances are on issues and put them up side by side against their opponents and make an informed decision about who you vote for. So take a look at those guys, take a look at their opponents, and make a judgment. Now, from here, we were considering talking about, well, where do you want to go? Where do you want the discussion to go? Don't take too long, because I'll come up with something otherwise.
One of the things that we were talking about in the show beforehand was this, we were talking about TPP, and then we were talking about the International Corporate Court, which is sort of assuming or taking away sovereignty of people from, or taking sovereignty from people and giving it to corporations that are multinational, transnational.
That's the Trans-Pacific Partnership, which one party is saying that they kind of, they're not against it. And the other party is very much for it, but their candidate for president claims to be against it, and that candidate being Donald Trump, and I'm going to put forward the statement that Donald Trump is a liar when it comes to what he's for and against. He's been on every side of every issue. The other candidate, Hillary Clinton, is accused, with fair reason, of being on every side of every issue. But on Trans-Pacific Partnership, and I'll let Mike in a second go on and talk about those major things about the Trans-Pacific Partnership, which are like all the other trade agreements that have come before them, are very problematic. But both political parties are, in my opinion, very corporate, and regardless of what you're told or what they say or what the candidates say, this is just the next in a long line of things which have hurt American workers, hurt the environment in other countries, hurt workers in other countries. They do nobody any service except for multinational corporations. Now, continue.
Okay, so around the turn of the century, a guy named Kenichi Omai wrote a book called The End of the Nation State, and basically he was saying that the organizing principle of nation states, which really came into existence in around the time of the Age of Enlightenment, like maybe the 17th century, 16th, 17th century. So really it's like a 500-year phenomenon, which is not a long time in the overall scheme of human history. But he says that it's basically a transitional state, and that we're moving to a corporate organizing principle where the main organizational entities globally are going to be these transnational corporations that control all the resources and control really the laws as well. And then this is sort of in the heady days of globalization and the beginning of the internet and things like that. But it was at the same time that Manuel Castells was writing his book about the networked global society, and saying that the haves and the have-nots are not going to be about access to capital, but access to information, and that the corporations are going to own or control access to information on a global scale, and that it's no longer going to be the nation state. So I really think that this corporate court that has been set up, which takes away sovereignty from nation states, is a really ominous development in the 21st century. And I think that people might not know the name of this court, they might not be aware of it specifically, but they feel that they're losing sovereignty. And I really think that's where a lot of the anger is coming from in our nation, and what you're seeing in this election cycle. And then many of the organized political entities have become police states, even at the municipal level.
So if Coca-Cola or Philip Morris Tobacco feel like a law that's been passed in a more recent case, I think it's Nicaragua, but if the United States passes a law and Philip Morris or Coca-Cola or some corporate entity feels like that law harms them, what's the process?
So this is predicated on the idea that revenue streams are property, and they are asserting their property rights to protect their revenue streams. And that's where the idea that it comes from. It really comes from this idea that corporations are people and have property rights at all. But when there's an adverse ruling against a corporation in a judicial system that is ruled by that's organized by a nation, for instance, in the United States federal court or something like that, they can then appeal to this corporate transnational court, and this transnational court can override the ruling by for instance, our federal court, or in Nicaragua, the Nicaraguan court, or something like that. So it's a really, really serious, and it's not just for revenue streams; it's for personal and criminal liability too. There have been corporate executives that have been convicted of crimes where they would have been sent to prison, and those convictions have been overturned. So this is a really big deal.
Has this been a result of previous trade deals that have been struck?
Yes, every trade deal has, NAFTA has it. They all, and it's a trend. What happens is they keep putting this codicil into these trade agreements so that they become. So it's not just. It's when we talk about a trade agreement, it's not actually just a trade agreement. It actually becomes a law, right? And then everybody has to sort of abide by it, and it gets ratified, etc. So it becomes a law. And then, we've basically given up a certain amount of our sovereignty to this international trade structure, which then refers to this corporate court. So it's a problem.
Could I intercede?
Yes, please.
Well, for example, what happened was when Obama said, "Okay, no XL pipeline," all right? So the company that owns I guess it's a company that owns the oil rights, turned around and has now, in one of these international courts, suing the United States for $15 billion.
Right.
All right? Because you have stopped their flow of capital.
Right, their future revenues.
Right.
Absolutely.
That's what's happened. And I guess the European part of the deal, what is it, the TTIP, all right? The French and the Germans have said dead. They will not cooperate with it. So they say that Kerry is going on a sweetheart tour to 20 some odd European capitals to try to sell the deal. But right now, Germany, France do not wish to lose their sovereignty, and therefore they are not part of it. And now that Brexit has happened, you would have to have a separate agreement with the UK rather than with the EU. So they may not be part of it either. So it is likely that TTIP, that Obama really wants to have signed
Yeah.
before his administration is over may not happen.
Is the European Union similar? So what's the difference between the European Union and a trade relation, a trade partnership? Is there a difference?
It came out of a trade partnership. It came out of what was it? The European Commonwealth.
Okay.
And it's much more than a trade partnership, because what happens is the European Parliament agrees to a certain set of rules, and these sets of rules are voted on by them. But then each country is allowed to modify that set of rules so that it fits in with their country's point of view. I mean, the one I deal with all the time has to do with animal research. Mm-hmm. And there is a directive, that's what they call them. And there's a directive on how all the countries have to follow animal research. And each country then was given something like a year to modify it so that it fit in with their country's legislation, and also still followed what the Europeans wanted, and they all did that. And I don't know if it's been completed. I think it has. I think all of the nations did that.
Can I give you an example that's been in the headlines of late, which
Yes.
is the Epi-Pens from Milan, right? So the technology for that was developed by the government, and Milan basically bought the research and developed the product, right? So they bought the intellectual property, they built out the product. The CEO started out as a low-level clerk at Milan, and she wound up being the daughter of Joe Manchin, who wound up becoming the governor of West Virginia, and then the senator. And as soon as he gets elected, she gets promoted to be the director of corporate affairs for the corporation, and they developed this product, and it's now a $26 billion market for Epi-Pens. Her salary now, she goes from 1991 or 1992 as an hourly salaried employee to making $18 million a year, and she just raised the price on Epi-Pens by 500%.
Well, somebody's got to pay her salary.
Right. Well, here's the other thing. So it's not just that, it's that they did this corporate inversion. Mm-hmm. So they did a merger with a corporation in the Netherlands. So it's now Milan NV. So ostensibly, it's a Dutch corporation now that owns intellectual property developed by the U.S. government that was paid for by taxpayers.
I'm presuming that was probably in public universities in America where
Right.
these were developed.
Often.
Right. Yeah. Oftentimes.
Describe
Yes.
what a corporate inversion is, because I think a lot of people don't really understand what a corporate inversion is. We've heard a little about that in the news.
Sure. So what happens is a corporation that is based in America, that's organized in America, that's an American corporation, will merge with a corporation that is headquartered in another country, usually a tax-favored country. Sometimes it's a shell corporation with the same cast of characters on the board of directors, et cetera, or sometimes it's a legitimate, larger corporation. But basically, what they're doing is to get a tax reduction. So instead of paying the corporate tax rate in the United States, they're paying the corporate tax rate in, the Netherlands or the Caribbean or wherever it is. Oftentimes, it's in like places like St. Kitts or St. Martin's or in the Caribbean, things like that. The Isle of Man is another one. There's some small islands in like the South, and these islands specifically go into the business of setting up these shell corporations to do this because that's how they get revenue. They basically have corporate citizens living in these tiny countries, and they pay taxes there, and that's but the tax revenues on a $26 billion market would be huge for the United States, but now the United States is not getting any of the tax money. It's going to the Netherlands, and Heather Bresch is still making $18 million as the CEO of Milan NV division, and Joe Manchin let it happen.
No, the Epi-Pen, that has to do with diabetes, correct?
No.
No. It's for people who have food allergies.
Okay.
When they go into anaphylactic shock.
Oh, okay, yeah.
It's a
Here.
shot of adrenaline that
Excuse me, let me show you my
relieves
Epi-Pen.
Okay.
relieves the reaction. So my niece has a severe
Yep.
strawberry allergy and has been in anaphylactic shock 4 times in the last year, and has used her Epi-Pens 4 times in the last year.
Exhibit A, Epi-Pen. Now,
And these things have to be renewed every year. They have a shelf life. So after a year, they're no good. You got to get new ones. So it's like an eternal, gigantic revenue stream for Mylan.
what were they costing before? What do they cost now?
So what they cost now, the adrenaline, the dose costs about $1, and all it is epinephrine.
Epinephrine, yeah.
Which is easily made. It's all, tiny, very tiny margin, and then the actual injector that costs like $3 to make. So this, what you're holding in your hand, may cost, just in terms of manufacturing, cost probably $4 or $5, and they raised the price to $600 to sell these things.
For one item.
Yes,
Actually, CVS asked me for $6.99.
really.
Oh,
Yeah.
there's-
Retail,
there's-
yeah.
Retail.
Yeah, they come with the manufacturer's suggested retail price on them now.
I think they said $6.99.
Well, we're going to continue. I don't know if we're going to have as many visuals for our second show, but we're going to do a second show for tomorrow. It's been Progressive Soup, Michael Zacchea, and Myrna Watanabe, my esteemed guests. And we shall see you tomorrow at 12:30 noon. Thank you. And we'll continue the conversation because I think we're
I think your point about genes being activated is a really important point.
yeah, I hadn't thought about that, but that makes some sense.
Yeah, well, genes interact.